Testing. All right. I think there's at least one person here. So if you have access to chat, if you could let me know how I sound, that'd be great. Hi, Sadie. Can you hear me? Cool. I'm going to play a random YouTube video. And can you tell me how the volume of that sounds? Can you hear that? Thanks, Sadie. Sadie, can you hear my system audio playing something right now? Great. That's great. Well, that's interesting. One second. Let me try playing something from... Yeah, so right now, the thing that I am trying to figure out is playing system sound from like a YouTube video over Hangouts on air, because I can easily display my screen and I can talk, but I don't particularly want to just output. All right, let me try something. We'll see. I have multiple headsets on because I have one headset feeding into my mic and one headset feeding into my computer. So I'm going to try and pull the computer one and see if Hangouts on Air can still pick up things from itself. Let me know if you can hear this.
Great. I feel like I put it on Twitter, but I also feel like I shouldn't say who it was. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say. Yeah, I don't feel like it's a secret, but just in case, I guess I won't say.
Can either of you hear that?
Like, the showrunner follows me on Twitter, and he let me come and like shadow him at work and watch how a writer's room went. And I felt like really, really, really fortunate for that. I think a big, huge thing as far as how accelerated.
All right, that's fine. Yeah, no, I'm just using YouTube. It's all integrated in YouTube. I'm used to, for streaming, having two earbuds and then over-ear headphones on top of them, so that I'm not getting weird sound feedback loops. But I'm just going to pray that YouTube can handle that. I'm going to wait until 9:05, both because I just told some people about it, and so I just want to give them some time to get in. And yeah. It is very strange. Can I not? Okay, there. Pop out the. Can I pop out the participants here? Pop out chat. Thank you. Give me more chat shit. Can I not see? That is a crime that I cannot see. It is the software, Sadie. It's got an integrated encoder. Yeah, it's got an integrated encoder through. It uses live on air with Hangouts. So like the whole thing, back to front, is all set up. Like I could have it run through OBS and use my stream code and everything, but this just seems way easier. Because then I don't have to debug the extra layer, especially since my whole point was that I was gonna save it to YouTube instead of like running it on Twitch through OBS or something, or running it through YouTube through OBS, or getting some other encoder that's by default integrated with Hangouts on Air. I'm just going to use Hangouts on Air directly. Okay. Yeah, you can use OBS on YouTube. It's not one of their preferred things. I think mostly because you have to manually take the like YouTube stream address and stream private thing and run them through. Oh boy. Okay. Got 3 more minutes here. And one of the things that is just garbage here is that I can't see. Okay, I guess I can see participants. Like the fact that as the runner of the stream, that seeing participants, the list of participants in chat is separate. I have to minimize the seeing the chat itself in order to see the participants live is just total garbage. Okay, we have 2 more minutes here. I'm going to try and start right at 9:05 for some measure of right at 9:05 because we got a lot of material to cover. Yeah, no, Sadie. Like, obviously, Twitch is like, as far as stream like integration stuff, is like light years ahead of like we're using Hangouts and streaming it to a YouTube address. But vis-a-vis, like, I am giving lecture, but on internet, like, this is just fine. I make presentation. Look at my slide, you know. All right, we allegedly have a whole bunch of secret quiet people watching, which I'm fine with. How are we doing on time here? Got another 30 seconds, and then I will begin. Hi, Andrew. 7 whole live viewers? This is bananas. And I'm going to close out. So I'm not going to close out Gmail in case it'll ruin the Hangout. Whatever. Okay. The best part is because I have earbuds directly into my mic, when I'm making like horrible sounds like on the desk with the mouse or with the keyboard, I can hear it all. Like, I can hear what I'm sending out, and it's the worst. But here we are. All right, it's 9:05. So I guess I'll start giving this talk. So first, a few disclaimers. What? The rate limit? What? Oh, on the chat. No. Nope. Don't feel like doing that, Max. Deal with it. Okay. So a few disclaimers. First of all, I've never given this talk before, so this is very much still a first draft, even though I've already thought of all of the ideas that are going to be presented here before. So that's not new. I've spent 3 years thinking about some of the stuff that I'm going to cover here. In fact, last night was the 3-year anniversary of me posting about the first time I beat the witness. For some definition of beat the witness. I think for my first definition of beating the witness. So that's a disclaimer. So things will probably be a little rough around the edges. It was difficult trying to fit all the ideas that I was thinking about this, and quite honestly, all the things that I was trying to cover that the game covers into one talk. So we'll see how it goes. And the second disclaimer is what this talk is about. Oh boy, that's not over here. There we go. Does this work now? Hey, cool. What is the purpose of this talk? So we have a whole bunch of people over in this green zone where they know nothing about the witness, or maybe they know a little bit about the witness, or maybe they know a ton about the witness. But in general, most people know nothing about the witness, and they're really excited about it, or they're neutral about it, or they just don't care at all about it. And so what I'm going to do is try and shove everyone who's in this weird green area into the red area where they know everything about the witness and now can no longer experience the best bits. Like, just totally ruin it. I know I've done my job tonight if you come away from this and you're like, man, I really want to play the witness, and all the best bits are ruined. I'm deeply confused and conflicted. Like, that's sort of an optimal idea. Hopefully people will listen to this in the future. They'll have listened to me say, don't. If you're currently listening to this chat, or sorry, to this talk, and you actually want to play the witness, don't listen to this talk. This talk's really going to ruin it. And not just like, ooh, spoilers. Like, this is there are things about this game that like you literally cannot experience in the same way by having someone tell you about them before you experience them. And also, like, that can be true at any time in this talk. Like, if I get a little bit into this talk and you're like, oh, this is really neat, and I know there's even more secrets ahead, like, just pull the ripcord. Just get out of the talk. Just leave. I'd much rather you play The Witness and experience it firsthand than listen to my talk. And now that I've attempted to kick out some of my audience, let's move on to the talk proper. So the problem with talking about The Witness that I've run into, and why I created this talk in the first place, is that I want to talk about all the sweet things in The Witness, but to get to the actual interesting stuff, I have to explain the game, right? Like, even if you haven't played the game, you might not know anything about it. And even if you have played the game, you might not know enough about it to actually have like the kind of conversations that I want to have about the game. So we're going to talk about the key mechanic of the game. We're going to talk about all the kinds of puzzles. We're going to talk about, you know, the ending when you beat the game. And then we're going to talk about a ton more things. And then the actual talk will start. Where I actually say interesting things that like are related to the game and are not just a lengthy description of the game. Okay, so this is where you start in the game. Like, you boot up the game and it loads in and you're in this bunker and you move forward and you reach this puzzle here. And the game tells you to click, and when you click on it, you can click on the circle and draw a line to the sort of rounded end of this puzzle. And this is like the verb of the game, you know, not like gun or something. It's that when you click, your screen gets surrounded with this white border, and then you can try to draw lines to solve these line puzzles. So that opens the door. You take another step. Oh, this is a more complicated line puzzle. And you solve that, and that takes you up and out, and now you're in this just gorgeous, lush world. Your next puzzle looks more like an actual puzzle, kind of, if you're like a small child. And this is sort of, you know, the game is using these wires to lead you to successive puzzles. A whole bunch of wires are blocking what looks like another kind of puzzle. So that leads you to go to each of these individual wires to try and find puzzles there to solve them. They look something like this. And, you know, this one introduces you to like, ooh, you can start in two different places. Maybe only one of them can get you to the end. This one is weird because it has two endings. And one of them goes, the bottom one goes and solves the puzzle to help open the panel. But the other one goes up and out. And you know what's up with that? That's like the first of many things where there's like, there's other stuff going on here. So eventually you open them all and you have this puzzle and you do some random pattern because it looks like there are tons of ways you can solve it. And it opens the gate. And now you're out in the wide, wide world. And I've explained to people this game is in some ways like Myst, and in some ways totally the opposite of Myst. Because like Myst, you're sort of alone on this mysterious island and you're trying to solve puzzles and figure things out. But unlike Myst, you know, Myst, a lot of times it's like you turn a knob somewhere or you bend down a tree branch and then that causes the rocket ship door to open or something somewhere else on the island. In this game, like pretty much everything is the exact opposite of that. It's very explicit. So I'm going to try and move pretty quickly through the next 50 slides or so, which are mostly just describing all the different kinds of puzzles you can find on this island. and how to solve them. I'm just gonna rapid fire ruin everything at the very sort of basic level. All right. So you walk down the path. If you turn on the path, you can see there's a bunker here, and then there's another longer path that looks like there are some panels at the end. If you go to the bunker, you see a puzzle, and it's like, what? Like, what? You know, this seems a little bit more complicated than the thing I've seen. I think it's pretty intentional that if you see this, you can kind of fiddle with it, but maybe it's like, I'll come back here. And that happens all the time in the game. Like, the game is very intentionally, all the areas can kind of be reached from right away, even though there is some direction here at the beginning to try to suggest ways to go. But the game is very intentionally non-linear in a sort of like, having trouble, go work on something else kind of way. So if you just go down the normal path, you'll get down this row, and these won't all be turned on at the start. This is me after I've solved them. This is teaching you something about these black and white, different colored spots, and how you need to have them separated. And you're like, there were black and white spots on the bunker. So this is a map. This is a map from somewhere inside the game, but I'm going to use it to keep track of all of the puzzles that we know how to solve. So we solve the basic dumb mazes, and we know now like different colors need to be separated. And if you turn to the right, you can see like a little shed there. Oh, there it is. What's that? Ooh, this teaches you if there are little hexagons inside the line area itself, you need to cover them up. And those two things alone are enough for you to go back and solve that bunker if you want. So we figured out what the little hexagons mean. And at this point, like, the world's your oyster. You can keep going in that close direction to the left, but you can just walk all over the island. And you could have done that right away, but I think most people will learn those two rules first. There's like, I think, one place in the island you can't go from here right away. And some of them are more confusing places to go than others. So you can go back here, and now you have the tools to solve this. You have to cover up all the hexagons, and you have to separate black and white so that they're not in the same zone or zones. And that already starts telling you like certain circles you can't start from because you won't be able to solve the puzzle. If you get inside the bunker, all there is this box, and inside this box is it looks like a solution to a hexagon puzzle, but that's it. So that's weird. I guess, you know, memorize that, take a picture of it with your camera phone, with your phone camera. This is another little neat thing. I'll be talking a little bit more about these in the future, but if you look up, there's like a little porthole in the bunker, and it's set up so that there's a cloud and sort of gnarly tree, and such that when you look up through the porthole in the bunker, it's a perfectly framed tree with, you know, white leaves, essentially. That's not like a puzzle. It's just like a neat, not even puzzle. There are a whole bunch of those. So the next area you go to is this sort of mirroring area where you're drawing a line and it's mirroring your actions on the other line. So you need to draw something such that the same solution solves both sides. And then there's other versions where it's diagonally mirrored. There's this version here where it's diagonally mirrored, and these are already all solved, actually, and they're being solved from right to left. And the yellow, you're using the blue, and the yellow is fading out more and more and more. And so you learn that you have to cover up blue hexagons with blue lines and the yellow hexagons with yellow lines. But eventually the yellow line just fully disappears. And so you have to like look at, you have to keep in your mind's eye what the yellow line would look like so that you're solving the yellow line correctly. And ultimately, when you get to the end of this sort of mirroring section, and I'm not, like, one of the things that I realized I didn't have to do for this talk is I didn't have to spoil like every single puzzle. Like, you're still going to get joy if you go back to this game after being spoiled, because the puzzles are good. Like the puzzles leading up to this area are actually fun in and of themselves, and that's one of the things that keeps the game going, is that the individual puzzles are actually fun. But when you get to the end of this, you light up this orange box, and a laser device comes out of it and shoots out of it. and shoots out to the mountain. Obviously, this picture, spoilers, this picture was taken from my save where I've done almost everything in the game. So you can see there are other lasers. And, you know, that's what's going to happen in this game is you're going to go to areas, you're going to learn new ways, new rules, new ways of solving puzzles. And probably at the end of them, you're going to open up a golden box and shoot a laser at a mountain. Another puzzle in this area that I wanted to point out. This is one where it's the same thing where you're making one of the lines and the other line is just automatically mirroring you. But this one's interesting because it's very obvious in the still image. But if you were just doing a bunch of these line puzzles, it looks like there are no rules on the puzzle itself. But I think it's pretty obvious to see from here that your lines are perfectly following the contours of the rocks behind the puzzle and the mirror of the rocks in the water behind the puzzle. So we're already sort of branching out in what constitutes the things that matter, the things that we need to take notice of when solving puzzles. So, oh look, there's a mirror area. We did it. And that's those two different areas are sort of the mirrored areas. So let's look at the next area. This is the tree branch area here. There's a reason why I just showed you the puzzle where you had to look at the thing behind the puzzle, because that's what this tree area is 100% about. You come up to this puzzle and there's just a bunch of branch looking things in the puzzle, and it's like, well, how do I know which one to go to? They're all identical. And what you need to notice is that the tree back there is exactly matching to this puzzle. And so if you go to where the apple is, you solve it. And you can probably do this by accident, just by brute forcing it, right? There are only so many solutions. And so this is probably the first area that you'll encounter where the game punishes you for trying to brute force it, where all right, 1 second. Okay. Just double checking something in the stream. Where if you try and brute force some of the later puzzles in this sequence of puzzles, it will not only fail this puzzle, it'll turn it off. So you have to go back and solve the previous puzzle again. It's really annoying. But it's to make sure that, like, no, like, figure out what this puzzle is trying to communicate. And some of the ones in the future are a little bit more complicated than this, where the tree maybe is not facing the same way that you need to look at the puzzle, and you can tell by matching the branches to the puzzle. Or maybe someone's cut down the apple to have it for a snack, and so you have to figure out where the apple would be. Ooh. So that's the tree branch section here. When you're moving, I'm going to move on to the next section, which is in the desert up in the top left. When you're moving on there, you might see one of these weird black monoliths. That's just another one of those things that, like, don't know what it is. Just put it in my back pocket. I guess I'll figure out what it is at some point. This puzzle area, like, just some people just hate it. And I think there are a few reasons for that. The first reason is that they might come to this area and not pay enough attention when they're walking to the area, and they just get to this puzzle and they're like, what? There's so many ways to solve this puzzle and none of them are working. What do I do? I think the most common pathway you take to this puzzle actually shows you how to solve this puzzle. Which is, and if you're walking along that pathway and paying attention to this puzzle before you get to it, you'll see this glare. That's what this whole sun temple is about. Is that there's a ton of glare on the temple when you're coming here, and there's glare on this puzzle thing, and that shows you the puzzle. So that's the first reason why people might hate this place, is they might just bash their head against the first puzzle before they, like, accidentally see some glare on something, and then they're like, how was I supposed to know that? And then the second way that this place makes people mad is obviously all the puzzles in this area are elaborations and variations on this theme. And I think this is something that like I never really thought about because of physics, I guess, is the most likely reason why it wasn't arduous for me, which is that if you want to find how glare works, then you need to look at where your light source is coming from, how it would bounce off the surface you're trying to glare off of, and put yourself in the opposite way. His light model just does that. So like I am here, and so the sun is bouncing off of that panel at the angle that it would provide glare to me here. I think I've talked to a few people where their solution to the puzzle was, there's some further down in the temple where there's a light source and maybe there's like water that you can move. And they were asking me, oh, how do you solve, like, this area is stupid. You just like move stuff around and then find the random place that lets you solve the puzzle. And it's like, it's not a random place. It's exactly one place. And if you think about the way the light is moving, you can just go there and do it. Yeah, I know it was you, Sadie. There, I'll shout you out forever in the talk. Something that I really like is that this is a pretty early, right? This is the second laser box that you're getting. And when you get it, it shoots off it doesn't shoot to the mountain. So imagine just that one laser coming in from the right, and then none of the other lasers that you can see here. And then you shoot this one, and it doesn't shoot to the mountain. And you're like, well, okay, I figured they'd all go to the mountain, but maybe that's not what lasers do, right? So we'll look into that later. Okay, so now we know what this is. If you walk down through sort of the center of the area, you'll see this little pond. It's very pretty. I appreciate your residual anger, everyone in the chat who thought that area was stupid. Yeah, there's this pretty pond sort of in the center of the island. Maybe we'll talk about this more later. So the next area that I think is easy to go to is this area with trees. And since I've sort of jumped between these areas that care about things sort of in your surroundings, I think it's pretty simple to figure out right away here that you're following the shadows of these trees. You're trying not to cross the shadows. And then this is my favorite one from in the sequence, which is you'll start to see sort of all this broken sheet metal. And so right here, there are some earlier ones where you're ignoring sort of the shadows of the metal slats and still trying not to cross tree shadows. And I just wanted to put this one here. It amuses me because the actual solution is just whoop, little corner, because all the other stuff is blocked by actual branch shadows. This splits in half, and then there are two different ways to solve it. And then once you solve those two sequences, they open two sides to a door that then has a weird double shadow puzzle. So if you go the one way, then you get in a situation, and this is like a little washed out, but this is where you're actually following the shadows instead of trying to avoid the shadows. If you go the other way, it's more avoiding the shadows, but now there are things like, obviously there was an explosion or something. There's all this sheet metal, and it's like covering up sections of the puzzle, so you have to like figure out where the actual shadows would project on the real puzzle in order to solve how to draw them, and then like kind of get real close and peek in and then draw what you see there. Cool, we did it. We solved that one. You can go from there to the fort. For the record, there's a no. There's that three-prong thing in the middle that I skipped over. I mostly skipped over it because getting into the quarry can be difficult. So I think if you were just like continuing to move on the path of least resistance, that you might not figure out how to get into the quarry, because the easiest way to get in involves a doorway with puzzles that you don't know how to solve if you've been following this particular set of directions. So you might end up at the fort. this fort has two kinds of puzzles. It has these puzzles where you can step on panels and they'll light up and light up the color here. And you'll notice that the circle is blocked there. So you can't just solve this sort of manually by hand. You have to actually walk along the solution. There's a really clever version of this puzzle later where the way the fort is set up forces you to step sort of in the middle of the puzzle to start. And so you also learn, like, you don't have to walk in the way that the solution is. You just need the final light up situation to be a legal puzzle solution. So that's like very clever design. And then the other way are all of these hedge mazes where you walk a hedge maze, and then at the end there's a puzzle to solve, and the puzzle to solve is the hedge maze you just walked. But there are factors about each hedge maze that are different. So in this case, for example, there are these gates you can see that are blocking your way in certain ways, but those gates aren't reflected in the puzzle you have to solve at the end. So you have to kind of remember the path you took, sort of mentally insert the gates into it. And they're all sweet. And if you solve either these four or the four stand-on light-up puzzles, then you can climb up to the top of the fort. You solve sort of a puzzle that is the previous four puzzles you had to solve to get to the top all together as one puzzle, and then that lights up another laser. You're done. You did it. I'm going to skip that starburst thing because that is the sort of one place that you can't just go to immediately without going to another place. We'll get there later. Let's go look at that weird Tetris shape. Tetris is obviously the wrong thing to say because they're just generic N ominoes. And so this swamp area teaches you how to use these sort of omino pieces, where you need to make your shape box in that shape itself. This is another section here that teaches you how you can either add pieces together or keep them separately. How they combine. I think there are, like, this is probably the first rule, I'd say, that one second. Turning off all notifications in Gmail because someone is messaging me in GChat. Okay. This is the first place where, like, the exact rules of how the ominoes work you probably need to do a lot of this area before you piece together exactly how it works. I just want to give a brief shout out to, oh yeah, and then there's another, the other thing you learn is these sort of empty ominoes, which are negative ones that subtract. So there are a whole bunch of things that teach you exactly how omino subtraction from omino works. They teach you also when you have these at right angles to the thing that it has to be exactly in that shape. If they're at sort of a diagonal like this, then you can rotate them in any way, as long as you don't flip it and change the chirality. And that's how ominoes work. Yay, another laser. This is one of my favorite areas. This is the area that looks like a bunch of mountains here and 3 different color things. This is about color. This is the greenhouse. So you solve a bunch of things to see that it's not just like, oh, black and white. You need to separate everything that it's its own color has to be fully separated. And you open an area and you see these are already solved. And you might look at this and you're like, Brendan, there's things of the same color in the same area. Like, how is this a solution? That doesn't make any sense. Well, so the door you had to open to get in here was actually a glass door. And if you look through the yellow glass of the wall to get here, and look at that, through additive, subtractive, whatever, light, colors. And you can also see there's another puzzle to the right there. And I believe for that puzzle, you do have to look through this yellow one and that green one to make the colors work out. And if you just look at the 2 main ones here, you see the one on the left works perfectly. The one on the right, that still doesn't work. They're unmatching colors together. If you look through just the green on that middle puzzle, it works out. You eventually go to the basement of the greenhouse, And then you're solving puzzles in this greenhouse and going up on floors, and each successive floor is a different color. And that different color changes what colors these shapes look like. And so what you're doing is you're solving progressive puzzles in each new color using the same things until you get to that floor. And this was one of the 2 times that I literally laughed out loud during playing the game, because you're just, ooh, solve puzzle, just solving every puzzle for the proper color that you're now in until you get to that one. And when you solve that puzzle for the floor below it, instead of going up, instead of turning on that wire is torn and broken, and so it just sparks a little bit and doesn't move you. And I laughed aloud because I immediately realized, oh, what you need to do is figure out what colors are these spots supposed to be when I get to that floor, so that I can solve it for the floor above. And like that was just so delightful for me that that I was it's a joke. It's a joke in how the puzzles in the environment are set up, that you're just like, solve a puzzle, go up a floor, solve a puzzle, go up a floor, solve a puzzle, broken, figure out how to get to the floor above. And that's just really delightful for me. And eventually you get all the way up to the top, which is obviously out in the open air, which means you can you can use all the information of what all these colored spots look like in all the colors to then figure out either what their actual colors are, or like which ones are actually different colors from each other to solve this for white. And it's fully possible, like if you come back to this game, or if you just get lucky at the beginning, that you can just solve this for white color and go right to the top immediately. Like it's not like this is a required sequence. It's just these spots are what their actual colors are, and each individual solution brings you to the floor above, where that color is where that puzzle solution is the solution. Great, different colors. I believe we're going to talk about the monastery next. Nope, we're going to talk about the zigzaggy one near the tree. So this one is probably the hardest one to explain because all you see are these panels with ups and downs. If you go near them, you'll hear sound. And actually, if you look near the tree, there's a speaker. So this entire area is a sound area. Ooh. This is another area that, man, people just hate. And to some extent, like I think it's intended to be a little annoying. Like as you get further along, there are the sounds you have to follow, but then there are distractor sounds. I mean, like hearing pitch and speed and volume and that sort of thing isn't a skill that I've had a lot of time to practice, and so this was one of my favorite areas. But I can understand if it was one that someone didn't like. I've heard at least some people where they just thought there was no solution to these puzzles because they didn't realize that like the bird song was telling you something about the puzzle, which is just wild to me. I mean, I guess if you come here really early, but like there's no ambient music or sound on the whole island except when you're standing next to a sound puzzle. So that's that. So then the last one is this monastery, which is all about, instead of like the sort of shady trees area where you're doing stuff with shadows, this is actually finding perspectives where shapes in the environment direct you to how to solve puzzles. So here's one where you have to get to where these branches tell you where not to go. Here's one where you have to figure out the branches are overlapping the place you do have to go. I especially like this because you'll notice that the branches fully cover the solution that I have written there, except for that zigzag. So like, how would I know to do that zigzag versus another zigzag? That's because one of the branches broke off. Like, just love stuff like that. And let me tell you, like the moment when you notice this branch broken off, and how that solves the puzzle, like it's another sort of moment of true delight / anger. And so that's sort of what the monastery is about. So let's look at these last 2 areas. We're going to go up to this triple space up at the top here. It's like 3-pronged shape. In order to get in here, I think you have to solve a tetromino puzzle and a color splitting puzzle, a color separating puzzle. So it's hard to get in there, sort of by chance. But what this is it shows you this white shape. And if you notice here, there's no way to solve this puzzle covering all 3 hexagons, right? You either go up towards the top and miss the bottom hexagon, or you go make sort of an L shape and miss the top hexagon. And so what this white shape does is after you solve the puzzle, it looks through the whole zone that it's in, and it finds one mistake in the solution. So in this case, it would find one hexagon you didn't cover, and it deletes itself, and it deletes one mistake. And if deleting itself and one mistake means that the puzzle now is actually solved, then you've solved the puzzle. This one is also nice because it's it's the first puzzle in the area with this mechanic, and it controls the ramp to get up to the other puzzles. So you're just using this either when it's along the bottom in the L shape, then the ramp is down. When you put it up in the diagonal shape, then the ramp moves upwards in like a really kind of slow, annoying way. So that's that. So we have one more, but in order to talk about how to get to that last shape, we need to talk a little bit about the map that I've been using the whole time, because in that sort of quarry area that we just were in, there's a place where you can summon a boat. And this boat has the map we've been using on it. And the way you move around on the boat is you have a circle where you called the boat, and you draw it to one of the end spots. And so the end spot near the trees in the top right is the only way to get to that tree area originally. You can open up sort of a back door in, so you don't always have to boat there. Also, you can see off to the right there's like a slider bar with different solutions that controls the speed of the boat. I guess if you just want like a nice, pretty slow ride. Oh boy, this area. So you get to the tree area and you find these star spaces. And I wanted to show one picture that described as much about these rules as possible. So star shapes need to be paired in their area. And as long as there's a single pair of a star shape of a color in that area, that's fine. It's as if those two weren't there. So you can see here we have, like in this first puzzle closest to the screen, we have a pair of orange stars in each area, and they don't care the fact that there's like that one of them is sort of a white zone and one of them is a black zone. And if you look a little bit further up, you can see similar things with different colors. That is a lovely anecdote, Jamie. For future watchers of this video, it took him a while to realize that he could drive the boat. He thought like, oh, let's go back and check the map. Let's go back and summon the boat to check the map. That is a great anecdote. Yeah, so that's basically how these paired things work, is that if you have exactly 2 of one color starburst in a zone, it's as if those 2 starbursts weren't there. It's a little bit more complicated than that, because you can also use other objects of the same color as the pair filler, sort of. I mean, I don't have like a super duper concise way of explaining the sort of edge cases of this, but I feel like I could solve puzzles with these pretty easily. So that's that. So you solve all these puzzles, you learned all the things, you shot a bunch of lasers, and there's this area right in the center. It's the town, and you might have crossed through it when going between different kinds of puzzles. And what the town is it has its own box and laser, but it's combinations of all of these different puzzles. So you're going to find a lot of places, a lot of puzzles that combine other sections together into one puzzle. And you can go there pretty early, so you can be in a position where you see a puzzle and you're like, this is like 3 things I don't understand and 1 thing I do. Let me try and solve it. or you just go somewhere else and you're like, I guess I'll learn how this works later. If you go into the town, you can light up, there's a reflection panel. And if you angle it in the right direction, it bounces that one desert laser that was going off in a weird direction, bounces it up the mountain. If you, as you start to, if you haven't done this by the time you've lit a whole bunch more lasers, you're like, everything's going to the mountain except for this one. So that might lead you to the town naturally to try and figure out what the heck's going on with this laser. Why is it going in the wrong direction? You can bounce it up there. Yay. So at this point, you've basically covered everything on the island. You've solved every puzzle. So it's time to go to the mountain. You can obviously go there sooner, but this is sort of a good time to go. There's a weird puzzle up here that's just like a straight sort of crooked line that you just solve it. It's just as easy as like the first puzzles you did. So that's weird. I'm sure we'll never come back to this puzzle to talk about it more. So when you get up here, there's this box, and you can see that there are 7 panels that got swept away to let you draw this. And when you draw that, it opens up this big puzzle that these statues are standing on, and you have to solve it 3 different times to open up the staircase down into the mountain to unlock sort of the end game. Also of note is that you only need to solve 7 areas to unlock 7 things. And there are 11 lasers total. So if you're just like, I just can't deal with the sound area, or honestly, like for like accessibility reasons, like it's like I can't do the sound area or I can't do the color area. Andrew, we already did forest. We already did town. I'm just not going to talk about shipwreck. It's an area. It has stuff. But yeah, so you only need to solve 7 of the 11 lasers to unlock the triple puzzle to get into the mountain. And you only need to solve 7 of the 11 areas with lasers in order to complete the game in what I would say is a satisfactory way. So that's nice that you don't have to solve everything. I mean, it's sort of weird that you can fire 11 lasers, but you only need 7. Like, why would you keep getting lasers after? Who knows? So going into the mountain, I really like the descent into the mountain because, first of all, unlike everything previous, this is the end game, so it's super linear, and also the puzzles in this area are hard, but they're hard a lot of times in weird ways. So like here's one where you're drawing a puzzle and that's creating the floor you walk on. So you need to draw it in different ways so that you can reach the puzzles on the left and the right and solve them. A lot of the puzzles in this area, instead of having like a whole sequence of a specific kind of puzzle teaching you a rule, there are a whole sequence of puzzles being kind of nonsense in similar ways. They're the kind of things that, and yeah, Jamie, I didn't talk about shipwreck, and I'm probably not going to. They're the kind of things that like would be absolutely like awful if you had to do a whole section of them. Even if you had to do a whole sequence of them, they'd be horrible. But because you're only doing exactly one, you can be like, I am clever enough to figure this out, and I'm glad I never have to do it again. So the ones on the right here have like a bunch of colors and artifacts covering up the screens, and the ones on the left over there are ones where the puzzles move in some way. So some are slowly drifting. Some of the ones towards the end of that row rotate faster or move faster or translate faster as you move on them based on your XY position in the puzzle. If it were solid, they're just awful. But like they're good for exactly once. And I have sort of a screenshot here. It's a little bit harder to see because some of these are moving or flashing. And it's impossible to see how these work, but you can see that some of them are like weird and offset. if you look at the third puzzle there, to start that puzzle, you're clicking on it as if it were just in a normal place. You need to click in the bottom left area of the third puzzle in order to start it, even though that's not what it looks like. Another interesting thing about going down through the mountain is that there's this like nice concept art, right? You know, it's just like, oh yeah, we're finishing the game. We'll see some concept art, but that can't be all there is to it. Because sure, this is concept art, but like, look at these concepts for like a windmill that's somewhere in the game. Like, there's carving tools here, right? Like, that's not that's not concept. These aren't just models of what the windmill could have been. These are models of someone in the game making small wooden models of different kinds of windmills. So what's up with that? No? And we'll talk a little bit more about the story of The Witness later, because gosh, do I have a lot of opinions about the story of The Witness. When you get all the way to the bottom of this, I've totally skipped one of sort of the best core puzzles in the game, which is one where you're managing building two outlines that you can walk on back and forth to get them into this right position to get down to here. This one's neat because you have to make shapes in the little puzzles, and then those become sort of big ominoes, and then you solve the big omino puzzle on the floor that's created by your specific solution to the smaller puzzles. Excuse me. So eventually you get all the way to the end. You call sort of this glass glowing elevator out of the water, and you get in it. There are a few simple puzzles. It closes the door, and then you fly through space as sort of the walls of the elevator slowly melt away. And there's I believe, a Buddhist prayer that's being spoken by several people as you sort of fly over the whole island, and all of the lasers undo themselves and all of the puzzles turn off. And as you slowly fly back into the original bunker, and at that point, the game has fully reset itself. Everything has been unsolved. So now we can start talking about interesting things. This is from like a GameSpot, you know, like how to solve every puzzle in The Witness. And I just love it, which is, when you're ready, enter the elevator and solve its simple line panels to initiate the final sequence, concluding the game. Congratulations. We hope you found this guide helpful and enjoyed your journey through The Witness. You did it. You beat the game. There's nothing else. Sure, just kill my animation. The end? No, it's not. So let's talk about some things that you might have seen in this game that I didn't talk about. So the first one are audio logs. There are a whole bunch of these little yellow spots. So here's me climbing up onto the wall around the entry area. And you can see there's like a little tab there just poking out from under the pillow. And if you click on that, it plays an audio log. There are a whole bunch of them. I'm going to actually play this one. I'm going to try to play this one. Hopefully you can hear it.
Through many births, I have wandered on, searching for, never finding, house.
So first of all, could y'all actually hear that? Because I have a few more embedded YouTube videos in the future, and I'd like to know now if I'm just totally screwed. Very faint. Okay. I'll fiddle with the... Is it just picking it up on my mic? What if I move my mic back here? I'm gonna play it again just because this is a hard thing to diagnose.
Through many births, I've wandered on and on, searching for, never finding, the builder of this house.
How's that? Is that any better? Cool. Cool. Okay. Yeah, so all of these, a lot of them are quotations. And like they're just, I don't know what you'd call them, deep thoughts, right? They're just, a lot of them are meditations on things from different perspectives. I just want to call out like a few internet people where like I've seen Let's Plays of this game or people talking about the audio logs. And one of the things they talk about is like they just get bored with them where they're just like standing here doing nothing and listening to an audio log. And it's like, go somewhere else. Like, first of all, you don't have to listen. Like, after you get bored at your first audio log, you never have to click on them ever again. And second of all, it keeps playing if you leave. Like, it's not like there's a speaker here and you have to sit here with bated breath while it plays. There's a really lovely one at the top of the mountain from the Memoir of an Astronaut. And that one goes on for like a few minutes. And like you can stand there and stare out at the whole island from the top of the mountain, or you can just go and keep solving puzzles and just have the thoughts sort of bouncing around in your head. And, you know, I think this is the start of this, what this game is trying to say and what this game is trying to communicate. And we'll talk a little bit more about that after I spoil a whole bunch of other things. But, you know, what I want you to keep in your mind here is the sort of intentionality of what's going on here. That, like, these aren't just, you know, recordings of Jonathan Blow being like, here's what I wish, you know, this isn't like a developer diary, right? So, like, what are these thoughts trying to communicate in all the varied things they're talking about from various perspectives, and why? And are there more mysteries? Yeah, there are a ton more. Like, this is just a picture, but it's an audio clip from a podcast series involving, I think it's specifically interviewing game designers, but it's interviewing designers of some kind. But I wanted to clip a copy of it because I've told a lot of people that one of the things this game is about is epiphany, right? This aha moment where there are all these rules and you're just being taught them by solving puzzles, right? And like that's actually a little too shallow. And so let me see if I can play this.
Reading a book, like reading a sentence in a book isn't hard usually, but you got an idea from it, right? Yeah. So, and you just read and you read, and as long as the story is interesting, you've had a good time, right? Yeah. So The Witness is at one level doing something more like that, right? And so then when you have these moments of epiphany, like I was stumped on something, and then now I see what's going on, and now I can solve it. It's not just about the fact that there's a moment of epiphany, right? It's about what you realize, right? There's always a content to what you realize that doesn't repeat. But sometimes it's really subtle and you don't even know what it is. But you know there's something that you can like feel that there's something there. Like that really always comes through. Yeah. And that's in stark contrast to what happens in a lot of games. You know, like a lot of designers say, I want to make the player feel smart, or, you know, I want to give people an aha moment. And that's fine. But I think it's the content of the aha moment that matters more than the fact of it. Yeah. Right? Because a generic aha moment is like every other generic one in every game. But if you can make content that's its own thing, then it's not like every other one in every other game. I feel like something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good way of introducing the next thing, which is I'm going to go back to that one puzzle at the top of the mountain that was just as easy as the introductory puzzles. that had no purpose, which is that if you look out over the side of the mountain, you can see that the river is the exact same shape. And like that's neat, right? But it doesn't mean anything. But something that's interesting is that you really only have one verb in this game, right? You walk around, and then your one verb is when you click, you get the white border, and you can solve puzzles. And then so you click and then solve puzzles. But like the game doesn't, you don't have to be near a puzzle to click and create a white border. And yeah, so it turns out you can click on that pool and solve that puzzle. And there's sparkles and an explosion. And the sparklies go away to somewhere else on the island. And welcome to the second door, as it were. Which is that even if you think you solved all the puzzles, you haven't. You really, really, really haven't. To give you an example, I went back to the starting bunker. If you look back into that starting area where you were, oh, would you look at that? There's like a weird sort of cap over the top of the door, and then there's the long pathway. And if you line it up, it's a puzzle. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. Everywhere. Like, oh look, here's a random bit in the sand near the reflection area. It's a puzzle. Here's actually the first place that I found these area puzzles. So this is near the reflection area. Again, and if you, this is my first one that I realized, where if you line it up, then the glare makes that fully white. And I clicked on it, and I just, my mind exploded. That is a great question, Max. If everyone in chat can tell me the first place that you found it. So it looks like someone found it near the shipwreck. Someone found it near the end of the desert. I found it out here, sort of to the side of the desert. Someone else found it near the desert. Man, like the first time you realize this, it's just mind blowing. I have a friend, Britt, who the first time that they found it, they actually completed the game, went all the way down through the mountain, and I asked them if they wanted to learn a little bit more about the game. There might be a little bit more there for them. And I took them back up to the mountain and asked them about the puzzle at the top of the mountain. And I was like, what's special about this puzzle? And they said that the puzzle looked like the river. And all I said to them, and this we were texting, and all I said to them was, if the puzzle looks like the river, what does the river look like? And they just screamed at me for like the next 3 texts. God, it's just so good. I want to show you sort of some other places where, like, once you realize this is a thing, you just start seeing them everywhere. Oh, look at that! As soon as you solve a puzzle, these monoliths light up, and they light up coloring in the puzzle that you solved, and then you can see grayed out there puzzles that you haven't yet solved. And those are all puzzles that are sort of nearest to this monolith. And so once you solve a puzzle near the monolith, that can give you directions to all the other puzzles. And they're all hexagonal, and so if you follow sort of roughly in a straight, if you follow the perpendicular away from each face, that will get you roughly to where all of those puzzles in that direction are. So there are a whole bunch of monoliths, and they have a ton of puzzles on each face that are all these sort of environmental puzzles. This is my absolute favorite one. If you walk out the door, to literally walk to right there, dead center, is the third puzzle you solve in the game. And right there, like literally right there, if you stop in the right place on the path, like there's an extremely obvious puzzle in the sky, and it's probably one of my favorite puzzles in the game. because like at least the one in the bunker, you have to turn around, and so like maybe you don't think about doing that, and even if you do, you might not figure this out. But this is walking to the third puzzle. Another good one here. If you walk out on that path, remember where I said you turn left and there's a bunker and another path? If you look out on here, you can see a circle down there by the dock and then a line all the way along. And that's like another one where like I can show people a picture of this vista of like, here's all this pretty thing and all the stuff I've done. And like, oh, what? Like if you're not looking for puzzles everywhere, you just don't see the big obvious line puzzle in the center of the frame. Like this vista is engineered to put that puzzle in the center of the frame. It is also engineered to be early enough in the game that you will not notice it. Here's another place. There are all these fields of wildflowers by the fort. And these are not just like randomly placed here by a clone tool from a level designer. If you are looking at the wildflowers from a certain perspective, oh look, a puzzle. Oh look, a puzzle. But you need to be looking from that perspective in order to see them. Here's another great one. This is some flowers growing on top of the greenhouse. And you can look down on this from inside the greenhouse, where like you can look down at it through colored glass, and there's another environment puzzle here through that particular color of glass. Eric is saying that he kept seeing them, but like didn't try clicking on them for a long time, which is also just delightful. Just the idea of like there are these puzzle shapes all over the place. Max, why are you losing your mind? Is this you? I'm just like all of my favorite puzzles are ones that you never saw. This is another great one in the woods with the sound puzzles. You can find a certain vista where the trees, the holes in the trees line up to make like a great tree shape. I love that one. And once you start realizing that, you start seeing things like, oh, here's the reflection temple, the outside of it. And like, there's a circle at the top and there's that circle down at the bottom. And there are all these lines. So like, there are tons of puzzles here based on where you stand. There are just tons of them. There's probably like at least 5 or 6. But like you start seeing circles and going, is there a puzzle here? The answer is yes. Oh, look, there's a circle up there, and there are all these lines of the same colors going all over this side of the monastery. Yeah, they're all solutions. Each section of these goes to a solution to an environment puzzle, is an environment puzzle. I like this sad little cloud. I want to talk about the sad little cloud because I love it. Because there is a place you can stand where some of the clouds create a puzzle. But you can't actually solve this. If you click on it, it'll stop at the sad little cloud because it's the wrong color. And this we'll see. Maybe there's a way to solve that at some point in the future. Also, these are things from the swamp that moved super slow. There are all kinds of things. There was that ramp that moved super slow. Like there's so many things that you control with puzzles that then move like this like super sedate speed. Every single one of them that moves at a slow speed is moving at that speed so that you have time to solve an environment puzzle. So you can see here that there's like part of a circle in a shadow. And so this is moving at a speed. So in one particular direction, you can start to solve the puzzle, and then the whole thing slides over slowly enough that you can slide to the solution. And that's true of every single thing that moves slowly to make it easier for you to solve puzzles. It's not just like arbitrary slowness to frustrate you. It's arbitrary slowness to make sure that you have time to solve puzzles, that you're not racing to solve puzzles. Yeah, there's another one in the same slow moving thing. Actually has 2 different shadow puzzles on it. Here's another one where this thing slowly sort of does a rotation, and you can see that there are multiple puzzles under it. And so you need to be able to solve this, get it moving, and then run up to a place where you can see it. So, because one of these puzzles is blocked in both directions, and so you need to be able to solve different parts of it at different times. And you have to run up to this vista in order to solve the front half of it before it slowly covers up the front half, and you can solve the back half of it. And I mean, this is true for everything. Remember that boat where I was like, oh, you can take a nice slow ride? It's because when you're on the boat, there are whole things where you're slowly moving. And you need to be moving on the boat slow enough to make sure as you move around the island that you can solve puzzles. But not just that. So you can start the boat, because there are some puzzles that you solve by getting the boat going when you're not on it, letting it move around, and then waiting for the boat to pass by a location so that the exterior of the moving boat is part of the puzzle solution itself. And so you need the boat to be moving slowly enough that when you run to the place to solve that puzzle, that you're there in time. So like all of that is 100% intentional. Whew. And there are, I think, on the order of like 200 panel puzzles, something like that. And there are like 400 environment puzzles. like just going by a raw puzzle number, most of the game are these puzzles that you can beat the entire game and never know exist. It's just wild to me. So let's talk about some other things. Videos. So there's a theater down under the town. And remember these things? There are a few of them that you can find. And there's a place where there's a hexagon thing. And when you solve it for one of these shapes, thanks, Jamie. Yeah, it's like 519. There are so many puzzles. There are like a ton of puzzles, and I'm sure someone has the like sort of quote unquote actual answer. I'm fine not knowing exactly how many there are. Anyway, videos. So when you solve with a particular solution from one of these boxes in the theater, it plays a video. I'm going to play one of these. One of these videos is pretty short. I'm going to play it in full because it's the one that you find in the opening bunker. So it's if someone finds one video, plays it, and is like, I am wholly uninterested in this, this is the video they're likely to play. And so, and there's, I would say, oh, I could talk forever about why this is a great video to play, but I'm going to just play it first and then talk about it. And I'm just stealing from someone's YouTube channel here, so.
Well, that's no better a solution than any of the others, is it? So, in the end, have we learned anything from this look at why the world turned out the way it did that's of any use to us in our future? Something, I think. That the key to why things change is the key to everything. How easy is it for knowledge to spread? And that in the past, the people who made change happen were the people who had that knowledge, whether they were craftsmen or kings. Today, the people who make things change, the people who have that knowledge, are the scientists and the technologists who are the true driving force of humanity. And before you say, what about the Beethovens, the Michelangelos? Let me suggest something with which you may disagree violently. That at best, the products of human emotion, art, philosophy, politics, music, literature, are interpretations of the world that tell you more about the guy who's talking than about the world he's talking about. Second-hand views of the world, made third-hand by your interpretation of them. Things like that, as opposed to this. Know what it is? It's a bunch of amino acids, the stuff that goes to build up a worm or a geranium or you. This stuff's easier to take, isn't it? Understandable. Got people in it. This scientific knowledge is hard to take because it removes the reassuring crutches of opinion, ideology, and leaves only what is demonstrably true about the world. And the reason why so many people may be thinking about throwing away those crutches is because, thanks to science and technology, they have begun to know that they don't know so much, and that if they are to have more say in what happens to their lives, more freedom to develop their abilities to the full, they have to be helped towards that knowledge that they know exists and that they don't possess. And by help towards that knowledge, I don't mean give everybody a computer and say, help yourself. Where would you even start? No, I mean trying to find ways to translate the knowledge, to teach us to ask the right questions. See, we're on the edge of a revolution in communications technology that is going to make that more possible than ever before. Or, if that's not done, to cause an explosion of knowledge that will leave those of us who don't have access to it as powerless as if we were deaf, dumb, and blind. And I don't think most people want that. So what do we do about it? I don't know. But maybe a good start would be to recognize within yourself the ability to understand anything, because that ability is there, as long as it's explained clearly enough. And then go and ask for explanations. And if you're thinking right now, what do I ask for? Ask yourself if there's anything in your life that you want changed. That's where to start.
Yep. So that's the video. And, you know, this is a clip taken for this game, but not made for this game. And there are just so many reasons why this is a great first clip. First of all, someone in chat's already said the starting line is just dynamite for like, well, that solution's as good as any other, right? But also like what he's saying, you know, I've definitely seen some commentary online where people talk about sort of James Burke being kind of, you know, like he's like pro science, anti art, or like, you know, talking about the importance of base reality over artistic interpretations of it or whatever. But like, yeah, I mean, those are the things that James Burke is saying, but this isn't The Witness brought to you by James Burke. You know, this is The Witness brought to you by Thekla Incorporated, led by Jonathan Blow. Like, what is Jonathan Blow saying about what James Burke is saying? And the first thing that, like, it literally took me over a year to realize is that James Burke talks about, you know, here's this picture of these amino acids. This is like base reality. And then here's this book with the Mona Lisa in it. And this is like secondhand or third hand. And so like, it turns out that like, first of all, James Burke is just wrong, right? You know, James Burke is showing you a picture of the Mona Lisa. Like there's the Mona Lisa, which is an interpretation of something about reality, right? But then there's a picture in the book that's an interpretation of that, right? But then James Burke is in this Tomorrow and You clip showing that. And I mean, and then his other sort of layer is your interpretation, right, of looking at it. That's another layer, except that almost all of those layers are also true in the picture he holds up of amino acids. And it gets even worse, right? I can't imagine someone who spends any actual time thinking about this and comes away thinking that Jonathan Blow is trying to communicate the same things that James Burke is saying. Because all of those things that I just said were true, but also this is being shown to you in a theater. Like you're seeing the video in a theater, in a virtual theater, inside a game. And for all the people who are watching this talk live or watch it later, you're seeing it sent to you in a virtual theater inside a game, and then a YouTube clip of that, and then a YouTube video of that YouTube clip. Like, like part of this is just a joke, and it's just a joke that I feel like went over the head of like a significant fraction of people who watch this video. And I want to talk a little bit about another video. So I'm going to talk during this video, and I'm probably not going to play the whole video. So this is a clip from the end of a movie called Nostalgia. Actually, play it, please. So this is the end of the movie. And this priest is trying to light this candle and then walk across the sort of empty water basin in the church. And the candle keeps going out. And I want to point out a specific spot in this. So he's trying to walk the lit candle from one side of this all the way to the other. And I don't know, I think it's on this trip that the candle goes out. Candle goes out, and I just love this bit of acting here when he's looking around, reaching in his pocket for a way to light the candle and looking around, because like there's no one around. And there's another video that talks about this, and I can't remember whether it's either Joseph Anderson or an extra credits video. I think it might be Joseph Anderson. And so this part of my analysis of this video, I'm just cribbing from him, which is like he's looking around. There's no one to stop him from just relighting the candle, right? There's no reason why he has to go back to the start, relight the candle, and walk all the way across again. But he decides to do it. And the context of this in the movie is actually, it's even sort of worse than that, in that this was sort of like a thing that he promised of a madman. Like he told a madman that he would do this for him because of things the madman believed that he didn't believe. But like this is the end of this movie where he's trying to fulfill this promise because of, he doesn't believe what the madman believes, but he does believe in his word and a whole bunch of other contexts from the movie that I'm not going to get into. But, you know, for being a very weird video, like this is probably of the videos the most on the nose. Like this isn't like some, you know, interpretation of layers. Like this is a very simple video, and it's saying this is you, right? This is you solving puzzles. And at some point you've maybe forgotten the reason why, or maybe you never had a reason. Like, but if you're still here and you're still watching this video, or you're still somewhere else on the island solving puzzles, then you're the person who keeps going back and lighting the candle because you want to see it to the end. And that's what we're going to do. If I skip to the end here, I just want to note that the ending is a zoom out in here, and you can see there's a circle. And actually, if you go around to the back of the theater, you can see through the back of the screen, and there's some distortion so that becomes a puzzle. And in fact, every single video has puzzles. The Burke one actually has 2 different puzzles One of them is when he's showing the here. Let me go back to the Burke one. So I pause it right at the start of the video. So there's this green thing here, and you can see that that's the same as the proteins. But then there's also this sort of arty thing here that lines up with the art book and creates a puzzle solution. So like every single one of these also has a puzzle. So like you're trying to puzzle out this deeper meaning, and it's very possible that it's very possible that all your brain is doing is just thinking back to these puzzle shapes and seeing them everywhere instead of pondering on the things or in addition to. I apologize, Jamie. Apparently he was on the way back to the theater to hunt for puzzles and I spoiled some puzzles. Well, listen, there's going to be some spoiling in this game. So that's the theater. We might come back and talk about the theater a little bit more towards the end. Let's talk about the lake or the pond. So it's very pretty. If you watch it though, yeah, I get it, Jamie. I didn't think you were angry that I spoiled it. Max, I'm just going to quote you here. He said, the candle one made me ask, why is he doing this? And then I had a moment of, why am I doing this? Exactly. Like it's extremely on the nose for sort of how out there some of these videos and audio logs are. If you are watching the lake, you might notice that it changes as you play the game. So you can see here, before it was sort of placid, but here you can see I have like some blooming water lilies. I have some fountains. There are these glowing paper candles. And like, why? To answer that question, we need to look at the map. We need to look at the pond in the map. Does this shape remind you of anything? Yes. It's this shape. The pond is the island. They're identical shapes. And what that means is that every one of these things is in a place in the pond where it's communicating something about that place in the island. So all of these lit lanterns, those are the boxes you solved. If you fired a laser from the box, that paper lantern will light up. I believe the lilies are, I know either the lilies or the fountains are where you can find solutions to the theater. And then the other one is there are things when you've fully finished everything in a monolith, I believe. So like in some way, this pond is like a both a visual progress of your game, but it can help you also figure out where things you might be missing are in the game if you're especially observant of the locations in the pond. And I did not figure this out for the first, 50 hours that I was playing the game. Like this pond was mostly fully changed by the time I figured it out. Then there's the underground. What is the underground? Well, if you're going around to a bunch of different places, you might see things like this door, and you can definitely see there's a staircase down there. But as far as like you can play through the whole game, even knowing the environment stuff and all that, and never figure out, you never get to the other side of that door, or the other side of this door down by the in the Sun Temple, or this like walkway that's above a place near the theater. Like you just never get there. What's up with that? There's a door here there's a waterfall sort of near the mountain, near the swamp area. So to get to the underground, we need to talk about the top of the mountain again. Remember how I said you can solve 7 of the 11 things, and there's no purpose to that because there are only the 7 flaps that open? So it turns out if you go down the mountain staircase, into the staircase into the mountain, and look up at the box, boom. Underneath the box, 4 more panels are open, and you can solve it in a second way. And if you do that, it turns on an orange wire. that goes down deep into into the mountain near the very end and turns on a puzzle that was previously turned off. And that puzzle has a bunch of orange triangles on it. And you might notice that when I covered all of the puzzles in the game, all the kinds of puzzles, I never talked about orange triangles. That's because they're just scattered around. There are all these just randomly scattered puzzles that have an orange triangle on them, or have 3 orange triangles or 2 orange triangles. And it's just like every other kind of puzzle in the game where you need to use the puzzles to solve the puzzles, except these are randomly scattered in obscure areas all over the island. And the only thing they're teaching you is so that when you get to this puzzle, you can solve it. Because this puzzle opens up the underground. It turns out the solution to the triangles is that you just need to make sure that that number of triangles is how many sides of this square have to be surrounded by solution line. So this puzzle is just black. If you didn't solve all 11 and then finish the box up top, turn it on. If you solve this puzzle, it opens up part of the rock face behind you, but only for like 10 seconds. And so you need to hear something and then turn around and figure out that there's now a hole sort of in a side area and go in there, and you're in the underground, and there's just more puzzles, like tons more puzzles in the underground. And you can open up all those doors, which connects like every area in the game. So there's this whole network of tunnels underground that connects to each other. And these puzzles are hard. Like all these puzzles are hard because you have to get all the way down through the mountain to get to the first way to enter them. Speaking of hard puzzles, let's talk about the challenge. So there's a puzzle in the underground that a lot of people call the challenge. I think it's called the challenge in the like in the whatchamacallit, the what's it called? Max, I don't know what you want me to let you know when I'm spoiling. Like, I don't know what of the challenge. You just don't want to be spoiled about what's in there? Like, what the reward is? Or what? Okay. All right. We lost another one. So I'm going to try and speak about the challenge for like, so it is 10:31 now. I promise I will be done the challenge by 10:35. How about that? Are people still in the chat? Or did I lose everyone? Sorry, 1 second. I mean, I can just keep going, but okay. So let's talk about the challenge. So the challenge is you walk past this area, and then you see this. And when you turn this music on, the puzzle up there turns on, and you start solving a sequence of puzzles. Except there are 2 things unique about the challenge that aren't true anywhere else in the game. First of all, the puzzles here are generated. They're different every time you start the challenge. And the second thing is the puzzles are timed. So this is what you'll hear when you turn on that record player. Not the coughing. So you hear this, and then you'll hear the movement after it, which is in the Hall of the Mountain King. And that's how much time you have to solve a whole bunch of different puzzles. I'm not going to talk about the details of that puzzle. I'm going to leave the details of the challenge to people who are actually playing it. But I will tell you one thing. If you play the challenge enough, this song will start to give you nightmares. The solution to the challenge gives you like it's not some like super big you win $1 million, right? Like you get a reward, but and I think Eric says it well here that like that part of the joy of the challenge is that by the time you get to it, like it's just like enjoyable and stressful to do. And that's it. That's all I'm going to talk about the challenge. So I'm going to give people a second to come back. Because now we're going to get into some real stuff. So the first thing is audio logs, the other kind, and we're getting towards the end of me being able to spoil things in the game, and then I'll have to start saying like interesting things, like actual thoughts of my own, and it'll only have taken 90 minutes of setup to be able to say my own thoughts. That'll mostly be borrowed other people's thoughts. So the first thing is audio logs, the other kind, and this starts to look at what is the narrative of the game, but it also like adds another layer. So I'm going to play. This is an audio log that you find in the underground, and these other kind of audio logs are all found in the underground. This one is my favorite one in there because it's actually an audio log that you can find somewhere else in the island, except for the end. Except for the end. Here are a bunch of solved puzzles.
God bade me behold the sea, and I saw the ships sinking and the planks floating. And the planks too.
The subtitles are just this particular YouTuber had French subtitles on. That's not the different thing.
Said to me, those who, instead of voyaging, cast themselves into the sea, take. Said to me, those who voyage, take no risk. Said to me, it's a part of salvation. A wave came and lifted those beneath it, overran the shore. He said to me, the surface of the sea is a gleam that cannot be reached, and the bottom is a darkness impenetrable. Between the two are great fishes, tart beef, fiery serpents. What? You've been standing there for like an hour. And I don't like sandwiches. Have you ever seen me with a sandwich? Why would you think I want a sandwich? Sorry. No, I need some sleep. We're working on it. I just want to read it right. We're gonna.
Okay, some people are saying that it's inaudibly quiet. Oh, it's perfect. Okay.
Be hearing this a lot of times. Every little thing matters because it's so good. Thanks. Yeah. Well, we've kind of picked high goalposts. Every little bit matters. Your coffee.
So that's that. All of the underground audio logs are from the readers of the audio logs elsewhere on the island, but talking amongst themselves about the process of recording the audio logs and the process of designing the island. Like, in some way, the people talking in the underground audio logs are the designers of the island, but not in the way John Blow or his team are, because they talk about the possible therapeutic use of the island, as if it is a place that people can sort of not go to. What's a good word? Let's say witness. Oh boy, I hate me. So like, people have said that like there's not really a story to the witness, or like there are it's like, here, I'll spoil you the narrative, the secret narrative of the witness that you can only get if you find the secret audio logs in the underground. Like, that's not, I don't think that's what's happening here. Like, there is a narrative happening, right? This idea of like maybe the island as some sort of like, I don't know, VR therapy tool that's trying to do something, and there are all these people that are on a team working on it and working hard, right? And they need to stop and take a break and get sandwiches and coffee. But like, that's not what's going on here. Let's talk a little bit more about what is going on and what isn't going on. Let's talk about the weird puzzle solution. So if you're in the underground, you might stop upon a box, like the boxes that gave you theater solutions. This box gives you this. This isn't a theater puzzle, right? Those are all hexagons. But you might be able to remember there's one puzzle in the game that has this exact zigzag shape, except that puzzle doesn't have any triangles in it. You know where that puzzle is? That puzzle is here at the end of the game. Or sorry, not the end of the game. The beginning of the game. Okay, that's me showing you the secret ending. It's at the beginning of the game. The puzzle that you could solve anything to turn off the laser grid to get out of the entry area, that's that puzzle. If you solve it this way, it turns that back on. And at this point, if you know about environment puzzles, then you might notice that the bright, hot white laser gate can be lined up with the sun to create another puzzle. And if you do that, it opens up another secret area where the gate is replaced with an entryway into an impossible space spa, basically, which has even different kinds of audio logs. And these audio logs are actual developer credits, where they thank the voice actors, the artists, production team. But they also have this ending. Let me... yes, Max, you can also get there without using the solution if you just restart the game, or if you just go out, if you know some things about the game and you end the game the normal way, the elevator takes you back to the beginning, then the gate will be turned back on, and you can just turn this on immediately. And one of the things I really like about this is like it can mean different things to you depending on which way you get there, right? Because not necessarily because of the way you got there, but because of how much time you spent with the game, conceivably, in those two different ways. So let me see. Okay. Some of these, the YouTube time codes are just totally broken. So if you walk, you can see a sort of weird 3D space of like an office or something, and there's a person in there covered in a sheet. And then if you walk further down the path here, you sort of walk into this collapsing space. And then you get the secret ending. Ooh. Yeah. And I'm going to play the secret ending and then talk a little bit more while it's happening. Okay, I'm going to talk about this a little bit while it's still playing. So there's a lot going on in this video. First of all, there's the part of this video that supports sort of the narrative that's happening in the underground audio logs, right? There's clearly this person they're in an office. It's obviously like the office that worked on the puzzles. They're in sort of like a VR environment or whatever. They have a catheter and a pee bottle, right? And they're coming out of it. And they're coming out of it into this world where they're just like, they're seeing circles. Like they're seeing puzzles and interacting with them. You know, it's not like unintentional that seeing that bullseye before this patient fell over, but they tried to touch it. They're seeing this stack of coins and trying to find maybe a place where it would line up, or maybe where this pen could line up, the lines coming out. So, like, in some ways, right, this is supporting that narrative. And that's why I put on the side here, like, oh, click here for the real ending. Like, this is what we've all been waiting for. Like, you know, this, like, seeing this doesn't say much more about that layer of narrative than the audio logs do, right? But also, this is like, yep, just it's a joke, or like a sort of a show of camaraderie, right? Because if we think about this, not in the context of this person is in the VR system, like let's just, like, this is obviously Jonathan Blow. Oof, a little harsh. This is obviously Jonathan Blow, right? And when the game came out, all the people on Twitter or social medias or whatever would text him things, be like, "Oh, here's this witness puzzle I found in real life. You know, I'm seeing them everywhere, man." Right? The Tetris effect, but it's the witness effect. And like, part of what this is it's a commiseration, like it's a joke. It's before anyone even sent Jonathan Blow those messages, he already had in the game a thing where he said, "Do you think you saw witness puzzles everywhere?" Like, they were working on this game for 7 years. Like, try and imagine being immersed in a world that you are trying to build so it's full of these puzzles for 7 years. Imagine how that would change, like, the default way you saw things in the world. And that's what's one of the, like, the thing that I love about this as like the real ending isn't that the part where it adds to that layer of narrative. It's the second part. It's the part where it's Jonathan Blow saying, like, yeah, I get it more than you could possibly imagine. And, you know, I'm sure people say things like watching a YouTube video of the ending of a game isn't the same as playing to the end of the game, right? If you're playing an RPG or whatever, it's like, oh, seeing the person sacrifice themselves. If you haven't played the game and built up hours and hours of that relationship, it's not as meaningful to you. But this game, this video, sort of at the end of the game, manages to do that for a game that has essentially no narrative, which is that you just, like, you don't get this video, like, you don't feel this video on a visceral level unless you've been immersed in trying to find these puzzles and the solutions for hours and hours and hours. And that's, like, just really great that, like, you can watch this video and someone can tell you what it means, but, like, in the very real sense, like, I just can't explain this video and, like, how powerful it is, like, emotionally, in like from a sense of camaraderie, from a sadness, from a humor perspective. Like, I just can't explain those if you haven't already played The Witness for several dozen hours. And in the age of the YouTube video, like, that is a very impressive thing to do with a game. And I won't show the last few seconds of that, so that you'll have to find it yourselves. And before I start, I could start talking about some of the deeper themes of the game, but I just want to take, I believe this is the last thing, which are what I call not even puzzles, right? Because we talked about sort of different layers, different kinds of puzzles. You have audio logs to find. And yeah, Max, the last few seconds spoke to you the most. It was intentional that I didn't show it. It's because, you know, the people who want to see the last few seconds will be compelled to seek it out. And, you know, it'll either mean something to them or it won't. But yeah, I wanted to talk about what I've called not even puzzles, or like, because there are the normal puzzles, there are the environment puzzles, audio logs, and then there are these things that are not even puzzles. You know, there was the cloud tree in the bunker. There's a few of them, actually. Here's a cloud tree here by the desert. There are a bunch of these human statues. Here's a man who's having a hard time of it, but if you look at his shadow, there are a bunch of rocks on the ground, and he's juggling them. And there are also dozens of these. This is one that made the rounds online, which is this part of the rock formation. If you tilt your head 90 degrees to the left, you can see a supplicant in prayer in the reflection of the water. You can also see in the background the giant statue of a woman carved out of the rock of the hill. But if you come over here, there's a woman on a box, and it looks like she's reaching out for the much larger statue that's much further away. But at this particular perspective, they're helping each other. Why did I put this here? Objective, man. This picture's misfiled. That's fine. So, like, one of the things I want to talk about is, where's the story? Here's a random Reddit comment I found. Out of curiosity, is there an actual story behind the game too? Or does the game just end with no explanation of what's happened? And, like, I don't even know how to start responding to that question. Like, you can find all the environment puzzles. And it turns out if you find all the environment puzzles on Monolith, it turns the Monolith white. If you don't want to know what happens when you turn all the monoliths white, then mute for the next 10 seconds starting now. All that happens is that they're all white. That's it. There's nothing else that happens. So that's a thing that happens, right? But it doesn't provide any additional closure. Like, at some point, you just have to realize, like, what are you looking for? Like, you've been playing this game for possibly 100 hours at this point. Like, what are you waiting for the game to give you? And since it obviously hasn't come yet, what has led you to believe that the game would give it to you? This is one of my favorite slides, which is like, I don't like saying things like, oh, you just don't get it, which I've said before in this talk. Because saying you just don't get it is the refuge of pretentious douches who like bad art. You know, it's like, oh, you just don't get it. They're being double ironic. And that's why I have, you know, a velvet painting of Hitler in my yard, right? Or whatever. Like, you just don't get it is a refuge for pretentious douches. But also, like, you just don't get it. Like, that's my answer to that Reddit user. Is that, like, I don't know how to explain what this game is trying to communicate. And to some extent, like, this talk won't help. If I could sit that Reddit user down and say, like, here, watch this whole talk. I'll explain to you what you were missing. Like, this talk wouldn't help either. And that's because, like, I have a few quotes here for why The Witness? Why all of this? Why does this game have so much in it, but seems to not explain anything? So this is a quote from David Lynch. As soon as you put things in words, no one ever sees the film the same way. And that's what I hate, you know, talking. It's real dangerous. Here's another quote. This is from Jonathan Blow. With a novel, it isn't like you're trying to find a slick or clever way to deliver some message and concealing it in 100,000 words. If there was a shorter way to get your point across, you'd do that. Let me hit that point harder. There's an old chestnut, I don't know where it's from. It says, until a writer can express the theme of his novel in a single declarative sentence, he shouldn't set pen to paper. I believe if you can express your theme in a single declarative sentence, you should write that single declarative sentence and make your novel about something interesting. And here's a section by Film Crit Hulk. I believe it's about the film Annihilation, roughly. It's about Annihilation. It's about feminism in movie creation. Because of that, the second reason I dislike left-brain movie watching is because I don't like the discussion that comes out of that mindset. Rather than getting into the matter of interpretation, it becomes all about answering the questions. Interpretations therefore become explanations, and it creates a kind of black and white approach to trying to understand a storyteller's logical intent over their emotional intent. Again, sometimes left-brain analysis is innocuous. If you want to fall down the J.J. Abrams rabbit holes of Easter eggs, then go nuts and post on forums to your heart's content. My problem is when that activity is not viewed as the fun side thing. It's instead thought of as the purpose of the narrative. And that's never the intent of the narrative, at least in 98% of cases. Even the much ballyhooed hard sci-fi writers like Philip K. Dick were enormously emotional and dealt in heavy abstraction. So when we go down the rabbit hole of left brain logic, we misunderstand what we're really after, especially with Abrams' mystery box approach, because it's actually a con game of mystery with no real answer, which he's made clear over and over and over again. So the real reason is not to watch movies in the left brain way. It's because so the real reason not to watch movies in the left brain way, it's because you will never, ever get what you actually want. Like, that's why. Like, what's the point of the videos? What's the point of the audio log? What's the point of all these layers of things? And why won't Jonathan Witness just tell me if I saved the princess? Why won't Jonathan Blow give me the audio log that tells me why I'm on this island? Tells me why I spent hundreds of hours of my life solving his damn puzzles, and I get to the end of it, and the reward I got is more puzzles, and I solved those puzzles, and the reward I got for that was more puzzles, and the reward I got for that was more puzzles. And the reward I got for solving the last puzzle in the world was that I was done solving the puzzles. Like, all the things that Jonathan Blow might want to say, I can't explain in this talk, even though we're nearing 2 hours at this point. Because if I could explain, if Jonathan Blow could explain the things that he wanted you to feel or think when playing The Witness in a 2-hour lecture, he'd book a 2-hour lecture and not spend 7 years making this game. Like, that's why this is so hard, and so the thoughts are so scattered, is because, like, I mean, it's fundamentally an impossible premise to explain a piece of art, at least a good piece of art, right? That takes advantage of its medium to say things in a way that only its medium can, in the way that it was conveyed. I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm going to kind of bounce around with some ideas that I've stolen from other people. So this is Mark Rosewater. He's the head designer of Magic. So he talks a little bit about this thing called lenticular design. In the context of Magic, it's this idea of like cards that are playable in one way, but have deeper effects for better players. There are a few points. These are the points that I think are relevant to this game as well, which is that some complexities are invisible to inexperienced players. Things have to have a surface value, and the experience is connected to how far ahead the player thinks. So if we were in the context of a Magic card, also to be clear, something that's lenticular, it's like one of those images where they're tiny angled parts, so that as you move the image back and forth, you see two different images. So here's a moving image that I stole from the article on lenticular design to explain that. I'm going to talk about this card, Black Cat, just very quickly, and what it means for lenticular design in the context of Magic, which is that it's just like 1/1 creature for 2, and when it dies, an opponent discards a card at random. So in the context of Magic, like why this is a lenticular design is that like very new players to Magic will see this as like, oh, it's a 1/1, it's a cat, like it's a creature, and like at some point it'll die and it'll do something nice, it'll make the opponent discard a card. But like there's a whole swath of players who are new to Magic that like when this creature dies and they remember, oh, you have to discard a card at random, like that is a nice thing that happens. Whereas to like a new player, like, or sorry, an experienced player, like all this card says to them is like, how can I make this cat die at a time when my opponent discarding a card at random is best for me, right? They're thinking ahead to all these like possible future game states where the fact that this card exists affects the game in a positive way for them. So for example, like my opponent has 1 card in hand. So if I have this cat, then they probably don't want to attack because I can block with the cat and let it die, and then they'll lose their last card, which might be good. So having this cat at all means that my opponent is less likely to attack, and so I can make other plays in the game based on the fact this cat might keep them from attacking. Just stuff like that. And I think that's true of the Witness too. Like, I don't think less of anyone who stops playing the Witness at sort of any of the markers that I put in the past. Even if someone never found out about the environment stuff, I love to be able to talk to people about all this stuff. That's why I made this talk. But like, there's still good stuff to get out of the Witness before you get this much out of it. But it's designed well enough that if you go this deep, there's something there for you. You're not going to waste your time. There's an example from Extra Credits. Yeah, I had something to say about character progress versus player progress. That like, right, the change that's happening is in your head. That nothing about the character in the game itself is changing. You're just like, you're becoming more experienced with the game in a way that makes the game more able to communicate with you, or not, or you just bounce off of it. Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about, we might circle back to lenticular design. I want to talk a little bit about intentionality and artifice, because a lot of people have called this game like really pretentious. And I want to talk a little bit about the idea of like intentionality and design. And this timer is never right. Okay. So this is a very small clip from Bo Burnham's show called What? He's a comedian. This is like in between bits. Like he's just given a joke and he's walking over to his next bit.
This show is called What? And I hope there's some surprises for you, or some, Jesus, sorry. It's a good start. I hope there's some...
To knock the water over, yeah, but you all thought it was an accident, but he meant to knock the water over, yeah, art is a lie, nothing is real.
So, we, grow up with your applause. Stick it with him.
He meant to knock the water over, yeah, but you all thought it was an...
Just don't, if it's on repeat, it will repeat. We can cut all this. So
he meant to play the track again, yeah, but you all thought it was an accident, but he meant to play the water track again, art's still a lie, nothing's still real.
Food jokes. Let's do some.
So, like, I love this clip because, like, Bo Burnham is playing with the level of artifice and intentionality in a comedy special that, like, you know, there's this realism in the patter, right? This idea of like saying things that are true, but like obviously anyone who's doing a comedy special has worked these jokes hundreds, thousands of times, right? Before they build a special out of them. And so like Bo Burnham here is just playing with sort of all of the little interstitial bits because sometimes there are intentional decisions there made by the artist, and sometimes there's not, right? Sometimes the artist is focusing on specific things like delivery of specific jokes. But that's not the kind of game that The Witness is. Like, I mean, you know, Jonathan Blow didn't tell them to tighten up the graphics on level 3, and then they just strewed some rocks everywhere. Like, you don't get, for example, this great fun fact. You know, people talked about like, you move so slowly, and like if I want to go do something else, it takes so long to get there. It's like, a fun fact, he intentionally made it from any point on the island to any other point on the island, modulo like having to open up some of the back doors, having already gone to locations, like having already gone to areas that you can walk to anywhere on the island in 2 minutes. Like that was an intentional design goal. That if you knew where you were going and how to get there, that it would not take you more than 2 minutes of walk time to get there. Like, that doesn't happen by accident. This doesn't happen by accident. All the lights, you notice, are all octagons. Why? Because anything that's a circle, anywhere there is an actual circle in the game, it is part of an environment puzzle. Every single circle, every single one. If he told one of the designers under him, or an artist or whatever, to make a building or make some rocks or make some plants, if it had circles in it, they needed to be gotten rid of or turned into another environment puzzle. This doesn't happen by accident. You don't get a lake in the middle of an island that's the same shape as the island, right? And tells you things about properties of the island by accident. Oftentimes when analyzing artistic works, you do it from a position of you assume everything you notice is intentional, right? As long as you're not doing some like wild out there interpretation, you just assume choices are all intentional. But I think, especially in works as big as The Witness, like that's just not a thing that's actually true. Like you treat it as true, but like it's hard to be intentional about so much of a work. And like that's part of what blew me away, is that like I would dig in a place looking for intentionality and find more of it. It's this idea of negative possibility space. No, you're just not gonna. Okay.
Expectation in the player. You better fill it, or the player's going to be disappointed. You ever had that thing happen where you come across a mountain or a high ledge or the like in a game, and you do all sorts of crazy things to get up there? You time your double jumps perfectly, you find a little bit of geometry sticking out that you can stand on, you do one last heroic leap, and you make it, and there's nothing up there. You're disappointed. By putting that piece of level geometry in there and giving you the tools to reach it, the designers created an expectation. You saw that ledge and that foothold, and it said to you, you can get up here if you're awesome. And so, of course, you said, challenge accepted. And naturally, you expected some acknowledgement of your awesomeness when you finally did it. If there had just been a treasure chest up there, even if its contents weren't that powerful, or if an achievement had popped up when you got up there, or something, you'd feel satisfied and awesome. You'd feel like you just experienced a piece of content that most people didn't because they weren't as clever or observant or nimble as you. Instead, you're standing on an empty ledge and feeling like a chump for doing all that work for nothing. Negative possibility space is something good level designers are very careful about. Good level designers will make sure to reward the player's expectations and always.
So, like when I first came upon this video, I was thinking about like, what is The Witness in terms of negative possibility space? And the first thing I thought was like, oh, it has infinite negative possibility space, right? Like there's all this stuff here, but actually like that's wrong, right? It's actually that there's no negative possibility space, and there's probably some negative possibility space if you dig deep, but like this has no negative possibility space in a way that like basically no other game I've played is the case, because it's not just like, ooh, if you jump up to the top of the mountain, there's a secret there, you get an achievement, you know, you solve the hard puzzle and you get a sweet video, right? Like that's sure, that's a version of negative possibility space that exists. Sorry, 1 second. I'm just getting a message that I want to check. Okay. Like, yeah, like all that negative possibility space has been gotten away with. Like everywhere you look, there's a circle, and the circle is an environment puzzle, and there are literally hundreds. You know, that's there, but it's not just that. It's that, like, in a way that doesn't happen very often in games, that when you look for other layers of meaning, that like there's enough there that you have at least some idea that you're not just making shit up. That like you're looking at a different level of interpretation, at a different layer of interpretation. And there's stuff in the game that means that you're not just, you know, doing some sort of crit lit analysis out of nonsense. You're like, the designer, if not intended you to go there, like the designer was thinking about that particular sort of level of interpretation. And evidence of that design is there at that level. And like, you know, like that happens in other art sometimes a lot, like in more mature art forms like books. And it just like it doesn't happen very frequently, I think, in games. Or if it, if you talk about like, oh, what is a game about, or what are its themes, or what beyond just like the narrative or the mechanics or whatever. Like I've never seen all of those things be populated with intent, and to have all of the things that all of that intent like aligned in the same direction, right? Like you can find interpretations of intent in the mechanics or the story, but like it's without work, it's not necessarily true that those things will all be pointing in the same direction, at the same sort of blob in understanding space. And I think that's the case for The Witness. And I just wanted to finish with Joseph Anderson, who's an enjoyable YouTuber who has he's very thoughtful. He makes very long YouTube videos about games that he calls critiques, not reviews. He has one about The Witness, which is one of the people that like I respect his intelligence, but like some of his takes on The Witness like could not be more wrong in my opinion. Another good example of someone who I think is very smart about game design and could not be more wrong is Rob Davio. It's unclear to me from like the one interview he was on where he ended up talking about The Witness briefly, where he was saying that like he was expecting there to be a story versus he likes playing games that have a story. It's like that's not this game. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of a review versus a critique, because this is a review versus a critique in the context of Hollow Knight. So I'm going to play like the first few minutes of this, and then I'll talk about it in the context of The Witness, and that'll be sort of some of my closing thoughts. No, that's not. Play the actual video, please.
Full of lots of enemies, upgrades, bosses, and a world that keeps expanding outward with new levels long after in regards to how successful it was and what it can judge a game. That should be obvious because there are many ways that you can judge anything, but there are two big ones that I want to speak about. The first is looking at something as a product that's available for purchase. The second is looking at it as art, or if you find that term too contentious, appraising it in regards to how successful it was and what it set out to do, whether that's intentional or your interpretation. In my mind, this is the difference between a review and a critique. A review sets out to decide if something is worth your money and time. A critique, on the other hand, cares very little about those things. Instead, it's about weighing the strengths and weaknesses of something divorced from any monetary value. These are not hard, firm, or other erotic descriptions to put in front of the rules for either reviews or critiques. My videos especially bleed from one to the other, although I think I'm more on the critique side of things and only like to mention value here and there. Enough of that, though. Why am I bringing this up for Hollow Knight?
So the short of it is he was bringing it up for Hollow Knight because from a review perspective, Hollow Knight is a great game. Like it has an incredible amount of content, but it's $15, and so like from a product value perspective, Hollow Knight is literally bananas. And from a critique, he has like some complaints, but some of those complaints are like, this needs to be fleshed out more, which are totally unreasonable to ask if the game is going to remain $15. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. This is another thought I had in the context of The Witness, which is like, obviously, I think that The Witness is worth its $40 price point. Normally, sometimes it can get, half that or less based on like Steam sales. If you have a PlayStation and PlayStation Plus, one of the March free PlayStation Plus games that you can download for free on PlayStation Plus is The Witness. So obviously from a review of a product standpoint, I like, yes, it's worth it. Obviously from an art standpoint, it's incredible. Like I got a tattoo of the bunker opening puzzle in The Witness. like, it's probably in my top 5 pieces of art of all time because of how beautiful it is. And I don't mean that, you know, the screenshots from it are pretty. But I also wanted to talk about this at the end because I want to talk about it for anyone who watches this either live now or later without playing, which is like, should you play The Witness after you've seen my talk if you haven't played it yet? And, you know, I can't actually answer that for you. But I can recommend, yeah, like, I think I still would have gotten a lot out of The Witness, even after having seen this talk and having a bunch of stuff spoiled for me. There's a bunch of stuff that I skipped. I skipped sort of everything I could while still spoiling everything I needed to talk about the things I did. But as I said during that one video, like, I can't explain, I can't make you feel the way that I felt after playing everything I did in The Witness. And there are some things that I've robbed from you in this talk, but there's some things that, like, I just can't rob from you that playing the game you'd still get. Like, the one thing that I have robbed and given to myself is I now have more people, conceivably, who know everything about this game, and so I can talk more about this game, because this was not an exhaustive description of all of my thoughts related to The Witness. It's just what I felt like I could get out in a little over 2 hours. So I think I'm going to stop there. And see if you stay here for a few minutes. Does anyone have any questions in the live stream? If there don't end up being any questions, then I'll just delete this part in the YouTube video that ultimately gets created. Obviously, I'll be available the various places you contact me in the normal way to talk about The Witness more, either, you know, after this talk or later, you know, after you play more of The Witness or whatever. I'll continue to show for The Witness every time it goes on sale. But yeah, that's my first draft of my thoughts on The Witness. And so now we're at the end of our journey. I agree, Max. Max is saying that a lot of his questions are probably long two-way conversations. Yeah. Also, for steely-eyed viewers, this is the only puzzle that I put on my slide demonstrations itself, because in the game, puzzles are what the game is about, and so they're not a distraction that they're everywhere, whereas puzzles being everywhere on my presentation would cause people to not listen to me because they'd be looking for puzzles once they understood they could be there. So there aren't any secret puzzles anywhere in this presentation, other than the really obvious one right here. I don't see any questions. So I think you know, it's getting late. It's over 2 hours. But that's my talk. Yeah. Thanks all for everyone who came out to see it. I know we were at like 9 live viewers at the top, and then we had some people bow out when they were worried about test spoilers. But yeah, I mean, it's been 3 years since I got to the bottom of the mountain for the first time. It's been at least a year in the making of this talk, of like grabbing all the thoughts that I've linked to here and trying to organize them. But thanks everyone who is coming out for live, and thanks for everyone who is watching this at some point in the future. Remember to smash that like button. Remember to like, subscribe. You know, this really helps on my monetization. Actually, I'm curious, because I played several YouTube videos inside this talk, if I'll be demonetized. I'll be Copyright, whatever. So thanks everyone, and I'm going to shut the stream down now.